whether to wear a mask or not. Hi everyone, this is Joy Divergence. Today this is about whether to wear a mask or not. If you feel your life is threatened, the question is by who? To be or not to be a victim. That's what this is about. Are we going to allow ourselves to continue to be a victim, the ultimate victim, and be forced to be hiding behind a mask? This is not an easy subject to discuss. So this is where you get to decide. It is not me that is the enemy. It is not you that is the enemy. But those that force us to wear a mask. Have you noticed that when you go outside that you're still alive, whether you wear a mask or not? Have you noticed whether or not when you step outside or not that you can still pretend to be wearing a mask even before the COVID came along? But yet, a lot of us were afraid to be ourselves because we were already being taught to hide in the darkness. That is what today's subject is to be. Today it is about whether or not you want to really be a victim or not. Of course you don't want to be a victim, but unless you really want to. But it is not up to me to decide for you whether to be a victim or not. What if life could be different? Imagine a world for a moment, one that's different from this one. Imagine a life where you're able to speak up and be yourself fully. Imagine a life where you have stepped out into the light and you are free to walk around and you no longer ever again have to wear a mask. But it is ultimately up to you to decide. It is not up to just me or the cat down the road. And it's not up to the dragon within us. Or is it? You see, have you noticed that when you put on a mask, for some of us, we feel claustrophobic wearing a mask? It's because we do not feel safe hiding any longer. But for some of us, we feel like it is a must. Have you noticed in your own circumstances of where you might be hiding? When you're imagining going down a path, you're walking down this path and this person comes along to you and says, you need to wear a mask. Because if you don't, this and this will happen to you. But do you notice or anger or perhaps even sadness? Something lower than what you really want. Don't you wish to feel happy? Don't you wish to feel free? Don't you wish to feel like, for once, you were the victor? But one to agree with being afraid, just for a moment. We start walking down that path instead. And we're afraid. We're afraid of everything around us. We're afraid of the world that we live in. That there has to be a good and there has to be a bad. But what if it was all good? What if it was all there to teach us a lesson? And as you actually release your pains, your fears, your doubts, and the need to defend them, and what if you surrender your will to the alter ego? The ego that must be right about the world being good and all of it being good, instead of the world that we feel that we must defend, that it is all bad. Again, to be or not to be is the question. To be or not to be the victim. The victim decides to sit in darkness. The victim decides that there is maybe a light at the end of the tunnel. And those that are seeking the light at the end of the tunnel are probably near death, except for those that know what the light really is. When you are near death and you are seeking the light at the end of the tunnel, perhaps it is because you have been a victim for far too long and you have lost sight of who you really are, because others around you supported you in believing that you needed to stay a victim, because that's what works for everybody, right? That's what causes us to stay in the world of black and white. Thinking that there's only good and bad. Thinking that if we feed only the right wolf, that we'll get out. But what if there was not just a black and white wolf? What if there was a blue wolf? What if there was a red wolf? What if there was a green wolf? Would the green be dark? Would it be light to you? See, black and white or dark and light still play a role as you go up the ladder, even in color. So you can have a dark green or a light green, or a dark red or a bright red. Or you can have a dark blue or a light blue. Which one resonates with you the most? It will tell you where you're at in the matrix. Because until you have gotten out of the black and white world, where the ultimate victims reside, but also those that are seeking the light. But some have learned to own only the darkness, to own the predator side of themselves, but decide that there is only the villain. And the villain only wants to eat the light. But that's because that is the only way he knows back to the light. He becomes the dark black dragon, the one that no longer knows whether or not there is good in the world, wonders where the light within you went when it is gone, and knows that there's another out there with the light, so it continues looking for the light and wants to take from those or eat the light from them. But it is simply because if they were shown the light in abundance, they would not know what to do with it. They would actually flee from it. Because they don't know what to do with it. Let's say you had somebody who was doing harm to you, more harm than good, and you show them an act of kindness, and you see hope in their eyes for the first time. But then you see those that are only lashing out when they are attacked. Those are your victims. However, the ultimate victim was actually the predator. But in order to stop the spiral going downward that creates the ultimate victim, some allow themselves to be brought into awareness. Some allow themselves to recognize that they are a victim. Usually these particular victims end up hiding in the shadows and don't dare to come around those that are in the light. And sometimes, because the light is what they feed off of, they will grab all the attention they can and make the other person, that is usually somebody who wants to focus on being in the light, he grabs that light from them by being in the light and causes them to go into a worse turmoil so that he can keep them trapped, or she can keep that person trapped. Whether you are male or female is not the issue, but sometimes that is what we perceive as the issue. But let's say for a moment that you looked within, and you were to look at yourself for a moment, and you were to go, do I have more dark energy surrounding me or light? And which one do I want more? You do not need to go to another being to get that light. You just simply need to allow yourself to meditate and find the light, and then be with the light. However, until you clear the ultimate victim within yourself, you will continue to remain in darkness. So it depends on what you really want. If you want people to say, yes, you are a victim, perhaps those that are of the far worse victims are those that are actually still hiding in the darkness or taking the light from. Usually they don't know any better. Usually, since the ones that don't know any better, what happens? How do we bring them to awareness? And how do you teach them to rise above the ashes of darkness? And even rising through the ashes of light and stepping out of the ashes suit, the ashes that have kept you covered, of where you have been residing in death, if not below death, in the sense of remaining with the energy of it. If you feel like you are lower than dirt, perhaps you are living in an energy that is lower than death. But isn't it time that you allow yourself to acknowledge that and go, okay, now what is my next move? If I want to live in a life where I am not below death, where I am living in a life where I actually am living in the energy of life. What is my next step? What must I do in order to get out of the matrix? This is one of the more harder areas to even look at, let alone to face. So if you are one of these individuals and you happen to be the person who feels like the worst victim, and you find yourself trying to compare to another individual, which life is worse. Perhaps you are one of these individuals that are living in below the energy of death. You are living in the energy of apathy. You are living in the energy of where depression sometimes is, and other times where you simply just do not care. Do you know what the interesting part about all of this is? There are some times that I revisit this area of my life, but not because I really want to be there, but because I want to resolve it, but because I really want people to see there is always a way through and out. If you are in a relationship, whether that is an intimate one, or perhaps it is where you are with family or maybe friends that are perceived to be family or perceived to be friends because they've been told, or you have been told perhaps, that that's what you are to each other. And this is how family is. This is how family works. When it is simply not true. But it has been a lie that has been told to you so many times until you believed it. The darkness that you reside in and the light of when you feel good and bad are simply a perception of death, and that how you have been taught that death is a good thing to reside in, or below death is a good thing to reside in. But then what happens? You lose your way sometimes until you get back to that point of where you're either residing in death or below death again. But then the coronavirus came. And for those of you that were residing in the energies below death, some of you were residing in them so heavily that when the coronavirus came, it ate you alive until you died because you believed more in death than in life. You believed that death was the answer more than life was. And for those of you that have survived, depends on whether or not you want to remain a victim or not. If you stay a victim and they bring up another disease or another virus that is an attack on life in some form or way, are you going to survive? Or are you going to die? Are you one of those individuals that sit there and says, well, whatever happens will happen? You're absolutely right. And I will not be here to convince you otherwise. But if you want something better, even a little bit, even just a small point of origin to reach through and actually be back in the light, you must allow yourself to reach a place of regret. You must allow yourself to regret what life you have lived in and recognize that it no longer serves you to live in that life. And it is very hard to acknowledge this one, because in this place, usually this is where the heaviest of narcissists actually reside. But either they will acknowledge it in front of everybody, but don't know how to go beyond it. If you are dealing with this heavy of an energy and you want something better, even if you're questioning it mildly right now, I invite you to release the darkness. I invite you to let go of it and step into the light. And even if you need to do it gradually but slowly, you will find a way through and out of the darkness. And in this life, you have chosen the path of darkness. And for some of you in this life, you have chosen the path of light. But then there are others that have chosen the fifth dimension. They have chosen to live a life where there is more color, where there is more vibrance, where their true selves actually ring. But your true self is only as much as you will allow yourself to see. But if you step into awareness and see what you think you have become in this life is your identity, what if everything you knew was a lie? What if everything you knew was there to simply hold you down and hold others down too? You don't like it when somebody else is mean to you. You don't like it when somebody else takes something from you. So then why do you take it from somebody else? You're both in those very low energies, but you don't know any better. So you continue to live this life and down one path and down into the rabbit hole, instead of looking upward and feeling the goodness. When you look upward, do you feel that goodness? And if you don't know what it's like to have a life of goodness, I invite you to allow yourself actually to take a moment to look up and feel what it's like to step out of that darkness for just even a moment. Imagine yourself zipping off a suit that is of the darkness and allowing your light to shine through. But if you need to keep on zipping off the dark suit until you allow yourself to really let the light shine through, in order for you to really be loved and not just have what is perceived love, then I invite you to release what has been no longer serving you and step back into the light. And start looking up, start looking towards those dreams, the dream life, and finding who you really are. And discover you no longer really have to reside in the darkness. That is a choice. It always has been, and it always will be your choice. But sometimes it helps to have someone to bring you into awareness, to understand when you are stepping into the rabbit's hole, to understand when you are stepping into darkness, and recognize what is pulling you down instead of building you up. Know that you are loved. Big Bear hugs. Namaste.